Welcome everybody to PSAND Lunch and Learn. We have people popping on and we'll let that happen over the next minute before we begin. We have a really awesome number of attendees today, so this is very exciting. And remember, this is a lunch and learn, so feel comfortable to eat your lunch and drink your lunch, okay? It's acceptable during the lunch and learn.
My son has hand, foot, mouth right now, and he's 8 months old, and it's just so sad.
Oh. Gosh, been a long
Hand,
time.
foot, and mouth is the worst.
Oh, I think it's working that way. He's starting to get blisters right here.
Poor
Poor baby.
Yeah.
So if you see a little baby, he's a mama's boy. So
I like babies. I might get distracted. That'd be good.
I'll try not to distract you, but he's really cute. You want to say hi?
Alrighty.
Here he comes.
Okay. Let me see him real quick and then we're going to start.
Yeah.
Hi, Bungie.
Hi, buddy. Aw.
Hi.
He's a
Yeah.
celebrity. Hi, buddy.
What's his name?
And he's not complaining, so this is good. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and get us rocking and rolling here. So welcome to today's Lunch and Learn. This is PSAND's third Lunch and Learn that we are doing. And we hold these quarterly right now on the third Friday of the month at noon at lunchtime. And we have the next few planned out. You'll learn about those at the end. We would love to be able to pick up the pace of these and have them more than quarterly. However, that is our schedule for right now based upon our capacity to deliver these to you. So welcome. Today, we're going to be talking about the power and practical aspects of telling your story. I'll introduce you to our presenters here in just a little bit. A couple of logistics. This is scheduled for 1 hour of time. Will be time for conversation and questions at the end of it. During the session, go ahead and use the chat a lot, all right? Because we'll be looking at that. We'll bring up things. We can kind of collect, some common themes, if you will. It's something that we can take forward with us when we plan our next sessions and debrief on this session, follow up and so forth. So please actively use the chat. We are recording the session, if I hadn't said that as well too. It's important for us to record it for one really great reason is you're able to get a continuing education unit, a credit, through fully participating in this hour-long session. So at the end of today, there will be a slide that will be presented in information on how to follow up and get that credit. And then these lunch and learns, this session as it's being recorded, and the PowerPoint deck that we are using is going to be available on our website. So just give us a little time to get that uploaded. More information will be available on that too. Immediately following our lunch and learn, we do something called casual connections. So we stay online for the next half hour. So from 1 to 1:30, we are here just to connect. That's what we're about. PSAND is connecting peers to one another. So we just have some casual conversations. Hey, what's happening in your world? Or I learned about this. Let me tell you about that. Or, hey, I have a question. Can someone help me out with that? Or, to show us our cute babies, whatever it is. Okay. So we have a half hour of those conversations. You're welcome to stay online for and get more connected. So there's that part of it. And then also remember to mute when you're not talking, so that way we can hear the presenters, clearly. I think that's the start of what I wanted to get going with introductions here. So introducing the session, let me go ahead and start sharing and get into today's topic. Alrighty then. Hopefully all can see the intro deck here. Aha. All right. So here we go. So Peer Support Association. I do see some names I haven't seen on our last couple of sessions. So welcome to everybody. Welcome to those that are joining us for the first time. Peer Support Association of North Dakota, or PSAND, we are a peer-driven organization. We're created by peers, we're operated by peers, and we're here for peers. So we're a statewide network, and we're dedicated to peers in North Dakota and advancing the profession of peer support specialists in the state. That we are a completely peer-driven organization here to help support peers in their professionalism, in their development, to serve the individuals that you work with and help people live their life in recovery. We build connections like this casual conversations that we're having at the end. That's really core to the work that we're doing, is connecting peers across the state. We have over 950 peers who have been trained in the state of North Dakota. We want to get connected. We want to get to know you. We want you to know one another. It's very important. Advancing peer support, the basis of these lunch and learns and other work that we're doing is to advance the profession. We know how valuable it is. You know how valuable it is. Integrate and innovate through collaboration, not only amongst ourselves, but other organizations and agencies across the state that we come in contact with and key stakeholders. And to be a shared voice for peers, one body of peers with a shared voice to represent the profession in the state. That's what we are about. Who are we here for? For you. We're here for helping you and helping the people that you serve. So you may be a peer support specialist. You may be somebody who's interested in becoming a peer support specialist. You may be a supervisor of peers or an organization that is looking at employing peers, simply, allies and key stakeholders and supporters of peers. So that is the audience that we are working with and who may be on the call today. Let me introduce myself. I am Andrea Hochhalter. I am one of 5 individuals that we call ourselves the PSAND Leadership Committee. You have 4 of us on the call today. 2 of them are presenters. So I'm here in Fargo. I'm driving the logistics of it. So welcome everybody. Also on the call is Emma Quinn. Emma, I just want to give a quick little shout out. She's also on the leadership team.
Yeah, so my name is Emma Quinn. I am based out of Fargo. I've been doing peer support work for, 5 or 6 years now. I have to do the math and think about it, but November is when I took my training a long time ago. So yeah, so I'm very familiar and passionate about peer support. So
Okay, wonderful. And then we have our 2 presenters, and they are Tamara and Kenzie. I'll let them introduce themselves and a little bit about why they're speaking to us today. So, Tamara?
I'm Tamara Heesers. I'm the recovery coordinator at the Harmony Center in Minot. I've been doing peer support as of next week, 8 years. So that's how long I've been in this position, and it's my passion and my drive.
Thank you. Kenzie?
Okay, my name is Mackenzie Larson. I'm a peer support specialist at Independence Incorporated. We're located in Minot. And I'm a peer support specialist that helps people navigate their way through mental health and substance abuse. I primarily work with the Free Through Recovery and Community Connect programs.
Okay, wonderful. Now, I would like to get to know all of you a little bit. With this many people participating, we are not able to do individual introductions. However, in the chat, if you would just go ahead and if you could tell us, who you are, looking for a name, maybe the organization that you work for, if you are employed by an organization as a peer, your position, if you can, and if you're not a peer but interested in becoming a peer. So go ahead, name, agency, position, or if you're interested in becoming a peer, let's introduce yourselves that way. Thank you. And again, actively use the chat. This is about networking too. So maybe you'll see someone's name pop up and like, oh my gosh, I recognize your name. I want to connect with you. Go ahead, do it. All right. There they go. Thank you. All right. As you're introducing yourselves, then let's get into the content for today.
So I'll go over a little bit what the objectives of our session today are. After attending this session, we hope that you're able to identify that the peer specialist personal story is one of the most effective tools they have in their tool chest, and also be able to identify how a personal story can be effective in supporting another individual. We want you to be able to discuss your experience or a secondhand observation with storytelling in peer support. We hope that you'll be able to recognize appropriate times and ways to share a personal story and how the presentation of a personal story might change depending on the situation you're in. We hope that will help you understand where boundaries play a role in story sharing, and we'll talk a little bit about triggers and some of the pitfalls maybe of sharing your story. And most of all, we hope that you'll be able to recognize that the peer specialist owns their own story, has the right and responsibility to know how and when to share it, and is not obligated to share to the point of discomfort or in situations not emotionally safe for them.
Okay, thank you.
All right. And then if everybody could just maybe in a few quick words, write out what they think peer support is in their words in the chat, please. All right. Standing by another person in their journey. Let's see here. Helping others through lived experience. Anyone else?
Well, as you're going ahead and dumping those in there, I will
Offering
move
hope,
us forward.
being there for them when they need it most. Awesome. Thank you for your participation, guys. Meeting a person where they are, love it. Being able to help others find hope again. Yes. Thank you guys so much. I really, really appreciate it. So I pulled a couple of graphics here. Peer support is, building rapport. Thank you, Dustin. Okay, so peer support is lived experience, advocating, forming an emotional connection, non-judgmental, strength-based, informal and relaxed, and people who share similar experiences to you. It isn't clinical treatment, diagnostic, telling people what to do, formal therapy setting, directly working with other providers, a place for medication, a therapist, or a counselor. And I found this graphic as well, and it's just a kind of in layman's terms. Peer support is when someone who has gone through tough times with their mental health supports someone else who is also going through similar stuff. It's like getting advice from someone who has been in your shoes and can relate to what you're going through because they've been there too. Next slide, please.
Oops, too many.
You're good. No worries. Okay, and according to the North Dakota Department of Health and Human Services, you guys can read that because I don't want to butcher it. So that is the technical definition there. Take a moment just to ponder that. I think my favorite part of that is the mutual empowerment component. All right, if everyone's good, we can go on to the next slide. The differentiation, or a peer support's differentiation versus a clinical setting, is their lived experience and similar in sharing their stories, which brings me to today's topic of how to professionally and effectively share your story. The peer support's personal story is one of the most basic and effective tools in the peer support relationship. This the lived experience provides hope, giving hope. This can be like a beacon of light for someone who has not quite seen the light, has not even pondered that recovery might be possible, and can provide hope for them for a way out and hopeful that they can find better days as well, just like you have. Giving hope to others by leading by example of your own successful recovery. Showing others that they don't have to face their battles alone. Showing someone that you've been in the exact same or a similar situation can be a game changer. In my experience, I've heard from some people that it holds a little bit more weight knowing that I've been in the exact same chair as they have been. And it makes an impactful difference when you can tell somebody that they've sat exactly where they are and that you believe in them and you believe that they are capable of a successful journey in recovery. And this is how you can guide them alongside you and help them navigate their way to hopefully become empowered on their own recovery journey. Some things that have been beneficial throughout my journey is if I can do it, I believe that you can too. I believe in you. I'm proud of you. You are worthy and capable of a beautiful life in recovery. This might be the first time that the individual you're working with has ever heard anything like this. Those little token phrases could be the game changer in the beginning of their recovery. That could spark that light, plant that seed. It's so powerful, you guys. Providing an empathetic nature. Show how you have navigated your way through your own recovery and been successful. Utilize the tool belt that you have and maybe lend those tools to the next person that you're meeting with. And then Tamara's going to go over a little bit here about providing a pathway and a point of connection.
I think the biggest point I wanted to make here is just that I see peer support a lot of times as a key to the door or a catalyst to get someone into seeking some assistance. And so they might not be able to connect with a therapist or something like that at first. And having that individual with shared lived experience can be the key that leads them into a fuller recovery experience as well.
Thank you so much, Tamara. Appreciate that. And then back to just your shared journey and lived experiences. Providing that eye-to-eye contact, that level playing field can really bring the barriers down, bring the walls down that might, I don't know about you guys, but in my experience, for so many years, I had my walls built up so strong to protect myself. And if I would have found a peer support earlier along in my journey, maybe those walls would have broken down a little bit sooner. Provides equality. In addiction and recovery, oftentimes we see others as better or worse than us. It's very difficult to see somebody eye to eye until you meet somebody who's been in the exact same position, and it really breaks down that wall like I had just spoke about. It's a reciprocal relationship. It's a give and take, as opposed to being above somebody or below them. We're right eye to eye. And the fear of judgment is ultimately minimized because you can really feel that empathetic nature, and you can feel the compassion. And in my experience, it's easier for me to form a trusting relationship with somebody who's also had some of the similar battle wounds that I've experienced. Next slide, please. And this is just a little video that I had found on YouTube, and it kind of talks a little bit about the power of peer support. If you could start that, Andrea, that'd be greatly appreciated.
It wasn't trying to end my life that got me a job. It was making the choice to continue it. I listened to that song by One Republic, and the lyrics that really stood out to me say, "I'd be ready and willing and able to edit the story, because there's so many people here to be so damn lonely." Choosing to be ready and willing and able to edit our stories is at the core of peer support. We can't change what's happened to us, but we do get to say if we're going to let it define us. So a peer support specialist is someone who identifies as a person in recovery from a mental health and/or substance use challenge and uses that lived experience combined with education and training to provide support to others. A peer has a real power to access connection because although we all have our own stories and experiences, we relate to a time when our lives were unmanageable. Some of us may or may not have college degrees, but we are experientially credentialed, having knowledge of hardship and perseverance that simply cannot be learned through a textbook. Although I am standing here today as a certified recovery peer specialist, and peers in the workforce do have a credentialing process in order to gain certification. And through that process, we're learning about how to support others, but we're also really taking a look at our own wellness journey in the process. So according to SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Service Administration, one of the foundations of peer support is that the relationship between the peer and the other person is mutual. So meaning that there's a shared responsibility between both persons. And because of this mutuality, peers have a really unique dynamic ability to provide an array of different types of recovery supports. So that first program that I was with a suicide prevention program. And I started meeting with someone.
All right, awesome. Thank you for that, Andrea. Some takeaways from that are just referring to connection by experience. And I really appreciated when she said that we don't have to let our story define us. We can edit it and rewrite it. That is the core of peer support. We can't change the things that happen to us, but we can choose if we're going to let them define us. Lived experience with education and training. Power to access connection. Relate to a time when our lives were unmanageable. Foundation of peer support is mutual, and it's a shared responsibility. I just thought that really encompassed a lot of the principles of peer support in my experience.
I have a little sign up on my bulletin board that I have to look at every once in a while to remind me. And it says, you cannot live in your story, but you can let your story live. And I think that's what Kenzie and this video are talking about.
Thank you for that, Tamara. I do appreciate it. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, identify when and how a personal story can be effective in supporting another individual. Identify when storytelling is appropriate and effective. It might not always be effective to share your story immediately. Take a little bit of time to build some rapport, get to know each other before you need to get to the nitty gritty. You know, you could just start off by, hey, what's your favorite football team? Favorite kind of candy? Just kind of break the ice, make it less tense. You don't need to go into, all right, tell me all your baggage. Let's make this fun and interactive and make the person feel at ease as you're getting to know them and maybe exchanging stories. Not everyone will have the exact same experience as you either. So that's why it's beneficial to take a little time to build some rapport prior to you just regurgitating information onto the individual that you're working with. Know your audience and how to engage. Read the room. No two people that you're working with are going to be the exact same. You might have to chameleon your story or your aspects of how you're going to help them. What resources, what referrals, what tools have been beneficial in your journey that are unique to the individual that you're working with at this point in time. Apply the lived experience that you have. So I personally work with people with substance abuse and mental health. So if I'm meeting somebody that has full-on anxiety, I might not talk to them about my drinking days. You really have to be able to gauge the audience, read the room, and know who you're working with and how to best relate to that individual. Don't stretch beyond your your scope of comprehension. If they have a mental health diagnosis that I cannot empathize with or relate to, it would not be appropriate for me to try to pretend that I know what it's like to be in their shoes in that specific situation. If they maybe have multi-diagnosis, I could relate to them with anxiety, but maybe I couldn't relate to them about schizophrenia. It's all contingent on that individual and where they are in their journey. Recognize how the presentation of your story might change depending on specific situations and individual peer relationships. That's kind of what I just touched on just a moment ago. And just be cognizant of the other individual and that you may need to change your language and the way that you approach the care plan or whatever it may be to try to be of benefit for them. Ask permission to share your own experience. This really empowers the other individual and allows them to guide the conversation. they might not want to know what Kenzie was like in 2017, but maybe they do. It's best to consider if they want to know that story. Ask their permission. Hey, can I tell you about a time back in 2017 when I was really in the same boat as you and what worked for me? It's a matter of respect at this point in time. And this goes back to the mutual respect, which kind of encompasses our peer support principles. Avoid morbid reflection and euphoric recall. So avoid self-loathing. You don't need to go in depth about how much you hated yourself when your mental health was struggling, or how much you hated yourself when you were homeless or in addiction or fighting your battle alone. We can visit it, but we don't necessarily need to stay there. Avoid swapping war stories. Just because you had something similar and you remember that basement or something of that nature doesn't mean that we need to go at length, because then we're almost giving it more power. We're focusing on the problem, and that's not where we want to be today. Avoid bringing up what didn't work. Be solution oriented. Focus on the solution rather than the problem. In my experience, we spent enough time in the problem. Let's move forward. Let's look for a lighter, softer way. Okay. Don't highlight how much fun you had during your active addiction or during times when your mental health was spiraling. Don't make it sound like you're missing out on the good old days. Don't live in euphoric recall nor morbid reflection, just like what I touched on. Don't glorify your addictions or mental health struggles. You don't need to focus on how terrible your life was before this either. And avoid trauma trumping. This is something I kind of coined myself, just because I found that a lot of times when I would meet with people, or I have witnessed, I should say, oh, my cousin has cancer. Oh, well, my grandma did. And then you're almost minimizing that other person's experience, or, oh, my anxiety is bad, but oh, nope, there's a situation where actually mine was way worse. So really just trying to one up that other person, and it just minimizes their experience, their reality, and you may invalidate their feelings. So just be conscious of that. Next slide, please.
Oh.
Okay, and now my lovely friend Tamara is going to take it away here.
I just would like to invite you to share a little bit about your time when, in your personal experience or your observation, a personal story had a huge impact on another person. A couple words you can share in the chat, or if you want to pipe in just for a short example of how you've seen this work.
I'll tell you guys an example of something that my doctor that prescribes my medication, she actually kind of shares some lived experience with me as well, but it won't be directly related to peer, but it always makes me feel better when I go and see her. Is one of my challenges is parenting little kids at the moment. And so that actually affects the lack of sleep, the chaos, that all affects my mental health, right? And so when I'm talking to her about the struggles and all these things that I have that are playing into the stress in my life, she actually brings up when her kids were little. And despite her kids being much older, her talking about how she has a spirited kid too, and like kind of like saying, so like nurtured parenting, I think is what it's called. She's like, oh yeah, this approach really worked for us. It brings that connection of like, oh wait, you're human too. You're not just sitting there as an authority figure. So although it's not saying, yeah, I know what it's like to go cry myself in the bathroom for 45 minutes while my kid's banging on the door, it's no, I can understand how hard that struggle is. And that why you might act that way or might respond that way. Respond would be a better. So I don't know, that's just an example that like immediately pops into my mind, but
Yeah, something that pops into my head too is I go every Friday morning to do a peer support group for individuals who are in the local hospital and the behavioral health unit. And when I come into the room, everybody's reserved. And when I say, I do this and I come here because I've been in your place, I've been hospitalized before, I know what it feels like. And I just want to give you a way to talk about what you're experiencing, and immediately faces open up, people lean in, and it's a way that your experience is just powerful to them and gives them a way in.
Nadine said, I had a client who wanted nothing to do with me. He finally opened up when I shared a bit of my past and showed we were not too different.
Yeah, I can relate to that as well, Nadine. I've had a couple of individuals that I work with that see me in the light I'm in today, and they're like, oh, you're perfect. You don't get it. And things of that nature. And then I'm like, whoa, there's a reason why I do what I do. Because I know exactly what, not exactly, I should reframe. I can empathize from a similarity, what you're going through. And all of a sudden they're like, wait, you? Really? And then we're seeing eye to eye. I totally get you, Nadine. Been there myself.
Yeah, one of my favorite experiences as a peer is, like I try to look like I have my poop in a group, but then, people are like, oh, you struggle with mental health. And I'm like, oh, yeah, and I'll share a little bit of my story about how I've struggled since I was a teenager and how bad it's, not glorifying it, but like, yeah, I've been to treatment for this. I've, had lots of experience. And just kind of that, like you said earlier, Mackenzie, like the wall drops and it's just like, oh, so you know what it's like to be in a hospital? And I'm like, yep, it's not fun. Like nobody likes being here. So that's why I'm here, is to help make this transition a little bit better. Let's see. I have a client right now that told me yesterday he really feels comfortable talking to me and sharing his situation because he knows I've been there and can understand the things he is saying. Absolutely. Anybody else want to share an experience or?
I just add what Kenzie had said above of not the words were in the hijacking, somebody's experience, and story, right, and trying to trumpet of how, this and sharing your story really, are so important, together, because I think about both as working as a peer and receiving, peer services, of that validation and what it does. So sitting on both sides of that, when I have been validated, when somebody, I can just, whatever word they use, whatever part of their story they tell, I'm like, you get it. That connection, wow, just, takes off. And what it does for me as the one on the receiving end. And then also when I'm that person, oftentimes more so kind of like, family peer support and mental health. And I just had done this yesterday, had somebody who had shared their child was in inpatient. And she didn't share a whole lot, but I took a moment separately just to let her know as a parent, with, a child who has been inpatient, outpatient, whatever services, that I have an understanding of, struggles that you're experiencing. No, I'm here for you. And boom, just took off with it. So yeah, that validation. Wow.
Brenda said, oh, okay. Brenda said, I took a client to our crisis residential unit about 7 months ago. She told me about her struggles and barriers, homeless, and her kids taken away. I let her know that I was in the same situation 19 and a half years ago. She is now 7 months sober and really working on herself. She told me last week that I planted the seed of hope and is setting, sorry, I'm like, these things make me emotional, and is setting up her home to get her children back. Love that. Dustin, a former employer that I maintain contact with, reminded me of a letter that I had wrote her 20 years ago. She shared with me that it was my words that encouraged her to start her recovery journey. I don't remember what I wrote back then.
Wow.
I love that. And what's funny about Dustin's comment is I had that come up a lot. Someone will say, and I'm sure a lot of you guys, oh, you said such and such. And I'm like, I did, kind of thing. Like, I'm like, oh, I don't remember, Because I was just, if you speak from the heart, usually,
Mhm.
it really connects with people. So,
And we may not know ever the impact we've had on somebody. Sometimes it comes back to us, sometimes we don't know, but we can have a huge impact.
oh, absolutely.
Right. Kenzie, do you want to move? Should we move forward with the next slide?
Yep, that's fine. Thank you so much for
Okay.
everybody's participation. I really enjoy it. All right. Understand where boundaries play a role in story sharing. What is shared, what the peer specialist is asking supported persons to receive, and what others ask the peer specialist to reveal. Boundaries are not only beneficial to myself as a peer support, but also to the individual that I'm working with. Not everyone deserves access to your story. This kind of goes back to like reading the room, reading the energy, things of that nature. You do, like, as a peer support specialist, we are still vulnerable individuals and we have a right to our privacy. If you don't feel comfortable disclosing your story, you don't always have to, and you definitely don't have to go at length. You know yourself best, mutual trust needs to be established. I kind of had touched on this a little bit earlier on building rapport, getting to know each other, because in my experience back in what I call my darker days, I wouldn't just break down the wall and just trust somebody right off the get, because I had this inherent belief that I couldn't trust people and things of that nature. So I certainly wasn't going to do it with some random stranger. But over the course of time, when I'm working with individuals, we develop that trust and that mutual responsibility, those commonalities that really break down that wall. And then we can get to the nitty gritty. But let's just be playful first. Honestly, I don't want somebody hitting me with 21 questions about everything wrong with me. Like, no, let's get to know each other a little bit before we get to all of that. Excuse me, not what's wrong, what makes us unique. Okay, peer support specialists are not therapists, sponsors, or 24/7 crisis care. These are a few things that PSAND as an organization we have talked about, or excuse me, as an association, we have talked about. Maybe the first time that you meet with somebody, just stating those boundaries. Like myself personally, I work 8 to 4:30. So once 4:30 comes, I'm not going to have that phone available. And I won't be able to check those text messages. So I let you know, hey, I will respond as soon as I am able. But, and Tamara says it quite nicely, crisis and things of that nature, they don't always happen 8 to 4:30. So if you just provide these resources, 988 is the crisis line, 211 is a community service line. And the way that it was explained to me, like, I think it's First Link is the one that we use here in North Dakota. And this will help you navigate the resources that you need when peer supports aren't available. And then that bottom one is a 24/7 recovery talk. So if peer support or the sponsor or whatever it may be isn't available, we still have those 3 outlets so that nobody has to feel completely alone. Because like Tamara says, we don't always spiral 8 to 4:30. We don't always need somebody or an ally during those specific business hours per se. Peer support specialist boundaries are different than a clinician due to being based on lived experience. There are still limitations. Build rapport and find out what you are comfortable disclosing. And then I'll have Emma share just a little bit here about the limitations and the peer support specialist boundaries being a little bit different than a clinician.
Yeah. So I was just going to add that, a lot of actually clinicians actually have lived experience, right? They might be in recovery themselves or have a family member in recovery or that struggles with substance use disorder or mental health. But the big difference is that they don't practice from that lived experience viewpoint. They practice from a clinical viewpoint. And peers are going to be practicing from that lived experience viewpoint. Both are incredibly needed and important. But it's just important to remember that even though a clinician may have lived experience, that's not where they're practicing from. And even though a peer support might understand some clinical language and things like that, that's not where they're practicing either. They're both very important roles in the system of behavioral health. But we shouldn't be stepping on each other's toes, if that makes sense. I did have a really interesting comment that I think I kind of want to talk about really quick. Says, I'm also experiencing a client right now that I think may be getting too comfortable, if that makes sense, to the point that I don't know if I'm really supporting her anymore. I'm trying to draw boundaries with her, that I'm her peer support and not her best friend. And I thought that was a really spot on comment, because I have experienced that myself, especially when I first started doing peer support. And I know Mackenzie talked about this in the beginning, but like establishing boundaries early, like, is really important. I found it was easier to implement at the beginning and then try to implement, through the relationship. And so when I get like those late night phone calls, I always say I'll answer if it's a true emergency, but giving them that 988-211 recovery talk has always been really helpful for me. So that way they know what resources are available 24/7, because I have to do things for my own mental health, but a clinician's not available 24/7 either, unless you go to crisis services or their services specifically for that. So I've always thought that was interesting, but I'm curious of what other people think about how to establish boundaries, especially when people start to think that we're more friends than.
I've had the experience of letting someone go past my boundaries too, especially early on when I was first working as a peer specialist. And we really kind of came to a head where I had to reestablish those boundaries. And I thought I was going to lose that person as a supported person. And I didn't, because what it did was show that I was being honest about what I needed in the relationship. They backed off from me for a little while, but they knew then that I was honest and they could trust me. And it does shift the relationship a little bit, but it's important to be honest, because you'll build up resentments if you don't, and you might not even be able to continue to support them.
And I did put into the chat, if you have tips, please enter them in and share with everybody. I'd love to hear what they are, to learn from one another, your experiences.
And I think we're running a little bit short on time, so let's keep going forward. But remember, there's going to be that half-hour discussion period after the presentation too, and you can always stay on and talk more about your situations.
Yes, thank you so much for everybody's participation. I'm just loving this so much. Okay, so I found this graphic as well that I thought was beneficial. So a peer support specialist requires certification, training, and a test. Using your own lived experience in supporting. It's an informal setting like a nonprofit center, or a home, or even a coffee shop. Often hosts some type of peer support group. Myself, I facilitate a peer support group every other Wednesday at 3 p.m. at Independence Inc. Form an emotional connection through shared experiences. Now, a counselor is going to have a master's degree, formal therapy like CBT or DBT, typically a formal setting like a clinic or private practice. Can't say they understand how it feels or talk about their own experiences. And this is kind of something that Emma had touched on a little bit ago. Professional boundaries, minimum contact outside of the sessions. So like I have some people that check in with me almost every day, as opposed to a clinician is going to be, all right, 10 to 11 every other Tuesday. That's it. So similarities: adheres to ethics and confidentiality, active listening and communication skills, work with individuals one-on-one, non-judgmental, and committed to support. All right, next slide, please. Okay, now this slide is about considering triggers, PTSD, vicarious trauma, and other adverse events that might occur, for either the teller or receiver from sharing a difficult personal story. So when I think of the word trigger, I know sometimes people are thinking, oh, that means that I saw a can of beer, I'm going to go pick up a can of beer. No, triggers encompass so much more than that. When we met prior to this, we talked about how you could smell the scent of apples and all of a sudden you're back to eating apple pie at your grandma's house in 1992. That could trigger that reaction. So a trigger is just any type of emotional reaction that can bring you back to a place or feeling that you've had prior. Triggers can happen at any time. They are not uniform and they come in a variety of forms and types. Triggers can appear when you hear a participant sharing a similar experience that you have had. This is what's called vicarious trauma. So if I'm working with an individual and they say a name that's similar, they set the stage mentally for me that brings me back to a place when I was not mentally and spiritually fit. These are things that are called vicarious. So living through that other individual, and now you're right back there yourself. And this is why it's so important to know how to protect your energy and recognizing what is mine and what is yours. And this leads me into why self-care is so important. In my experience, I have to spend time with my higher power every single day, whether that be through self-reflection, making connections, studying subconscious patterns within myself, journaling. I like to do a lot of comparison of where I was a year ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago, and just really reflect on that and where I'm at in my journey. And it not only benefits me, but then in the long run, when I can see how far I've come, then I can maybe help somebody else realize how far they can go, if that makes sense. Spending time in nature. This is really good, connecting with something bigger than yourself, outside of yourself, kind of what I had touched on about the higher power, which works in my experience. It might not work for everybody, but that's what works in my experience. Some fresh air, grounding, embracing all of the elements. Do what fills your cup. Prioritize yourself and what fills your cup. Whether it be art, time with your family, exercise, yoga, drawing, going to NA meetings, AA meetings, celebrate recovery, church, attending sporting events with family. Last night, for instance, even though I had this big presentation today, my cousin had a football game. That fills my cup. So that's what I had to do to charge my battery to be ready to go for today, guys. Okay. Connection versus attachment. You can definitely develop a connection with somebody without having an attachment. You have to be able to differentiate between the two. And you, like I said, as peer support specialists, we're vulnerable too, and we do what we do because we've been in that situation. So we need to also be cognizant of that and prioritize our own mental health and well-being. Otherwise, if we're not prioritizing that, we can't really be a full benefit to the individual that we're working with. You need to be able to detach from your work when the day is done, which is sometimes difficult because, like Tamara and I touched on, Emma and I, Andrea and I, this is a lot of life and death stuff that we're dealing with every single day. And you have to be able to somehow at least remotely detach. It might still be there a little bit, but you got to do what's going to work for you. Being able to differentiate, like I said, what is mine and what is yours. And then this goes back to protecting yourself while respecting the other individual. And then Tamara's going to cover a little bit on utilizing your supervisor or support system and a few other things. Thank you.
I just wanted to note that it's really important to use your supervisor. Not all of us who are working in new type peer support jobs have a peer support specialist as our supervisor, so that can get a little bit tricky. And that's what we're moving toward. PSAND is moving toward helping supervisors understand how to support individuals who are providing peer support to others as well. But make sure you use your supervisor or your support system to help you process some things. Of course, we can't talk about confidentiality outside of our situation, whatever we're in, but you can talk about situations, feelings that you're having, and that kind of thing. And then my thoughts were when Kenzie was talking about the self-care and everything that we need to keep ourselves healthy and avoid the triggers, vicarious trauma, that kind of thing. Flip that around then and look at what does the supported person need as well with regard to these things. They need self-care and that kind of thing. So take what you've identified as your needs in these situations and then view it from the supported person's point of view. Do they have triggers? You don't know? Ask them. Ask them if there's something that brings up bad thoughts or memories for them. Where are they in their journey? Don't assume that you know, and don't walk on eggshells because you think they might, you might cause them some pain. Ask them. And that's empowering to ask them. What is most important is that they are empowered in their story sharing process with regard to what they take in and what they share back. And then if they wish, work with them to develop their own self-care and utilize their own supports.
And there was just one point that I forgot to touch on is seek help if needed, whether that be if you want to, you know, seek therapy, sponsor, spiritual advisor, anything across the board there. All right. Recognize that the peer specialist owns their own story, has the right and responsibility to know how and when to share, and is not obligated to share to the point of discomfort or in situations not deemed as emotionally safe. Prioritize that you are as valuable as the individual that you're working with. It's kind of what I talked about with the self-care and your own mental health journey and just being aware of that. Each recovery story is unique. They may be similar, but no two are identical. And this encompasses all sorts of peer support. It's not just limited to substance abuse and mental health. There's so many different varieties of peer support out there, and it's going to continue to grow and grow. Respect your own values and moral compass. Contemplate your boundaries, values, and ethics prior to engagement with an individual. What sits well with my soul? Take time for self-reflection during this process. Journaling and expressing your feelings could be one of the most beneficial tools that you have available. Personal statements can be used as examples. You can create your own personal statement that you hold true when you meet with each individual. And it's kind of nice to just have that out in the open. You don't even need to necessarily write it down, but if you just know, this is my boundary, these are my values, my ethics, my morals. This is what I'm bringing to the table. And then simply keep what works and leave the rest. And then just a little bit of touch on this here that I did not add was, you guys, we're being given such a gift here to turn our pain into power and purpose. The power of testimonials and being a game changer for somebody that you wish you would have been. You went through it to help somebody else through it. And who better to help somebody on the recovery journey than somebody who is on their own recovery journey themselves? We're turning a liability to an asset and pain to power and purpose. Thank you so much for all of your participation today, guys.
So just to sum up what we talked about today, telling your story can be the most powerful tool in your peer support tool belt. It's why we do what we do. Stories can create connection and can assist recovering persons in their journeys. Stories used without skill and intention, however, can be less than helpful, and it can even cause harm to you or to the other person. So the peer specialist, we just don't go out there and willy-nilly share our story. We draw on our lived experience, our training, our conscientious practice, and our empathy to know when and how to use our stories effectively. So there's some upcoming events from PSAND that I want you to know about. We're going to have a Blue Cross Blue Shield provider info one-on-one session Thursday, November 9th at 1 p.m. over Zoom. That is geared at organizations that are wanting to start billing for Blue Cross Blue Shield services for peer support. And that is for providers. It could be for peer support specialists too, to kind of know what their role is in it. So anybody who might have a role with billing could participate in that. There's upcoming, we're going to have some peer support administrative rules listening sessions. We don't have dates for those yet, but that's about letting peers have input to the rules of our state that surround peer support and how we do it in the state. So watch our website and some notices for those so that you can give your input on how peer support looks in our state. And then our next Lunch and Learn is scheduled for Friday, January 19th at noon, and that will be skills and tools for effective communication. And when you get your CEU survey at the end here, there's some questions about what in that topic you would like to know about. So pay attention to that and give us your input. So if you are part of the peer, or want to be part of the Peer Support Association of North Dakota, find us on the web, peersupportnd.com, email us, peersofnd@gmail.com, or this QR code will take you to an interest form that will give us your information and allow us to be in touch with you.
Membership is free. All are welcome.
And then for CEUs for today's session, I am going to put the link in the chat for that. We asked you to just fill out a small survey, give us your email address, and then we will be able to get back to you with the certificate. As well, let me see if I can, here's a QR code there. Let me also put the QR code in the chat.
I encourage everybody to take a moment and think about the content from today. Maybe think about an upcoming conversation that you're going to be having. Maybe it's as a peer support specialist or a different conversation, and how you may approach your story or that conversation differently based upon the content that you heard today, what Kenzie and Tamara shared out. What will that look like differently? Will you state your boundaries where you haven't stated them, before, where you think more about triggers specifically where you haven't thought about them before? Try going someplace different in your story. So think about that for your next conversation.
Sorry, it's not letting me for some reason copy the QR to the chat, but the link is there.
Okay.
So, and for those of you who might be watching this later on a recorded version, there'll be a keyword, and the keyword for today is story. And that's to show that, just to show that somebody's watched the video before they request the CEUs from us. So that it'll ask for a keyword if you watched a recording, and that keyword again is story.
I typed that in too for anybody that's watching it later. So, also one other thing I just want to call out, if anybody is going to the Behavioral Health Conference next week, I know several of us are from our team, Tamara, Kenzie, and Emma, you'll all be there, right? Yeah, for Behavioral Health Conference in Bismarck next week, Tuesday through Thursday. We do have a booth at the expo for PSAND. So first of all, I encourage you to come by if we haven't met you in person yet, to have a conversation, to talk, to learn more about the work we're doing. If you're interested in starting a local network chapter of peers in your community, we'd love to talk to you about that. Dustin Eddy is doing that in Bismarck. So we would love to be helping others do that more in their communities. We're very active in Minot. We want to get very active in others to live out that mission, that connection, peace and support. So that'd be one, stop by the booth. The second is we have some open slots for volunteer time at the booth. So the booth is there for the full 3 days. It definitely needs to be personed during the break times. And so if you are going to be at the conference and interested in just taking a shift, great opportunity to meet with peers, to visit with us. You probably won't be alone at the booth, but let us know. We would love to do that. One of the things that you can do as PSAND, members, is to support the organization, the growth and the connection, reaching out by volunteering, an hour at the expo booth one of the days. If you can do that or interested or have questions, email Tamara. Tamara, do you want to put your email in there, or do you want to just use the Peers of North Dakota Gmail for that?
We can use the Peers of North Dakota, okay. That's fine. But I'll put my personal in there too. I don't mind.
Okay.
So.
Okay. Yeah. So. All righty. Look at that, 12:58.
I really want to thank all of you for coming on. Thank you, Kenzie, for all the wonderful information today too. And I encourage you, if you want to talk a little bit more about some situations that you're having or share some experience, stay on for our half an hour connection session.
Yeah, and we're always interested in hearing what you want to hear and talk about. So when you do the CEO EU evaluation, we have space in there for that. But again, use these ways to connect with us. We're here for you. It's about peers. So okay, does anybody have a comment or a question before we take a short pause and before we go over to the casual conversations?
I would just like to thank everyone again. I thought that this turned out fabulous, and it really, really filled my cup and my soul that all of you wanted to participate and join us today. Stay posted for more stuff, and you know how to get a hold of us if you need anything whatsoever.
Yeah, thank you again, Kenzie and Tamara. No. Okay, I'm going to close the presentation, but I'm keeping the Zoom rolling while I take a pause. You can chat amongst each other. You can keep your video on. You can use the chat. That would be just fine. But I'm going to do a little logistics here and get this shut down.
Is it Chanel or Chanel? How do you pronounce your name?
Chanel.
Chanel. I'm really interested in hearing more about this experience that you're having.
Which one with the
When
the
you were
best
talking
friend
about
one?
a person that's trying to be more friend than supported person.
Yeah, it's become just like, I feel like it's just like a hangout session with her.